Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I think we're ready to begin. Again, good afternoon. My name is Vincent Rougeau. I'm the Dean of the Boston College Law School, and on behalf of the Rappaport Center for Law and Public Policy at BC Law School and the Corcoran Center for Real Estate and Urban Action at the Carroll School of Management, as well as my colleague Andy Boynton, the Dean of the Carroll School of Management, welcome to Boston College. Both the Rappaport Center and the Corcoran Center are new to Boston College, and each has had an extraordinary inaugural year. I'd like to take a moment to thank Jerry and Phyllis Rappaport and Joe Corcoran for their extraordinary generosity in creating both of these centers at Boston College. This event brings our two centers together with the City of Boston to introduce Imagine Boston 2030, the first citywide planning initiative in 50 years. Boston, rich with history, is mobilizing communities, businesses, nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, and most important, individual citizens in a visionary initiative to ensure that in the years ahead, Boston becomes an equitable, sustainable, and welcoming city. Today, we all become part of the deliberative process Boston is undertaking to address critical public policy issues affecting urban environments, among them neighborhood revitalization, economic mobility, green space, and affordable housing. Boston College has long been involved with our surrounding communities, and we are delighted to host this event and join forces with the City of Boston to explore the impact of Imagine Boston 2030 and to engage and empower our students and the citizens of Boston to have a voice in the city's future. One particular voice resonates deeply with Imagine Boston 2030. We are honored to have the Mayor of the City of Boston, Boston College graduate Martin J. Walsh, with us to share his enthusiasm and vision for Imagine Boston 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mayor Marty Walsh.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you very much for that great introduction. I want to thank Boston College for hosting us tonight. I also want to wish the Eagles good luck in the Final Four in a couple weeks, so let's hear it up for the Eagles. I want to especially thank the Corcoran Center and the Rappaport Center for hosting this forum. I know that they were already mentioned, but I want to mention them again. Joe Corcoran and his family's here. I want to thank you, Joe Sr., and thank you very much. And Jerry and Phyllis Rappaport and their families here, thank you very much as well for what you do for the city, not just today, but throughout my entire tenure as mayor. I want to thank all the panelists that are going to be up here today. I'm not going to mention them. I'm going to mention a couple of them, but I want to thank them for being here, representing many different industries in our city, and certainly driving our future of our city. I look forward to discussions and what's going to come out of what we're going to be doing here today and the conversation we're having. I want to thank some of my team that when you think about how do you get to a point like this, we have a great team at City Hall, and I'm just going to mention a few of them, and one of them is on, I think a couple might be panelists, but our Chief of Economic Development, John Barros, is here. I want to thank John. Our Chief of Civic Engagement, Jerome Smith, is here somewhere. I want to thank Jerome. As you can tell, Jerome brought his own cheering section with him. Our Chief of Policy is Joyce Linehan's here. I want to thank Joyce. And also, some of the most important people in this room, as far as I'm concerned, about 50 of our Boston Public High School students are in this room, so I want to thank you for being here as well today, being part of this conversation. I also want to thank John Fitzgerald and Imagine Boston 2030 team for the great work that they've done. I know John Fitzy's back here somewhere. I want to thank you, John, and everyone on your team. We launched Imagine Boston 2030 over a year ago. We knew it was going to be an ambitious process. It was something that was exciting to see all the different responses that we've gotten so far in this conversation. We've held open houses, community workshops, social media surveys, suggestion boxes. We're developing an interactive online mapping tool with co-urbanization. Street teams are meeting with residents and walking the streets. It really, truly is a great thing to see happening in the city of Boston, what's happening with this program. It's not just about imagining our city in the future, but it's also engaging in the people in our city to be part of planning the future of the city and understanding the importance of what's happening. We released our first public document on community engagement. We're working on continuing getting feedback. The beating heart of Imagine Boston, though, the real focus of this isn't that it's my idea or our idea. It's really the community response. People will often say to me, and I think they do it because you're the mayor, or they might do it to the governor or other people, well, what do you want in a planning process? And this isn't my planning process. This isn't about what I want to see in the city. This isn't about my ideas. This truly is about having engagement with the community, for the community to come back and say, this is what we want to see in our city. We want to understand what drives our city, and what's going to drive the citywide plan is going to making sure that we talk to more people, and people understand the needs and wants of Boston people, and so that we understand the needs and wants of Boston people. And we need to do better in city government, and we can also serve people's needs and their wants. From the feedback we've gotten so far, we've heard three common themes from all different types of people. And it's something that I think on the way in, if you said, what are the themes, we probably would get them. But housing they can afford, something that we really need to do in our city. Better transportation options. And we saw last year with the winter the way it was, and we see every day, some of you, we take the cars in town or bicycles or walking. Walking, there's plenty of room. We're going to get more people walking, would be a good thing. But it's really about the transportation and better quality education for all. And we've been working on those three initiatives inside city government, but we also got to work to make sure and understand exactly how and why, how do we deliver all these different services. These are the goals that we're working hard to reach at City Hall, and we need everyone's help to make them happen. So as we talk about this planning process, we're going to continue to make the improvements in those areas every single day. And we're working very hard in those three different areas. One thing we know for sure is our city's growing. There's no question about it. And if you look at Boston's population, between 2010 and 2014, our population grew by over 6%. That's 2 times the national average. That doesn't take into account what happened in 2015, and we're working on those numbers. We've added 45,000 new jobs, and we're on track to exceed, and the numbers we're using, we're on track to exceed 700,000 people by the year 2030, but at the pace we're going to exceed 700,000 long before 2030. Right now in the city of Boston, as we speak, we have $7 billion worth of construction going on in our city. Whether it's economic development, building offices, building housing, we're building everything, it seems like, in our city. So it's an interesting time in the city of Boston. We must learn through this process how to leverage Boston's growth to make our vision a reality. While growth is a sign of success, it also certainly brings challenges. We must make sure that this growth is for everybody, not just certain people. And that's something that's very important when we talk about our housing plan, we talk about transportation, we talk about economic development. We need to make sure people of all backgrounds and ages and abilities can thrive in our city. And that's something that, as we look at this plan, we're looking across everybody. So every investment we make in our city, of our city's future, we must promote the well-being of our city, but also create multiple benefits. New housing aligned with transportation investments. So it's not simply building a housing development, it's also how does that development, how does that new housing fit with transportation? How does open space improvements reduce climate risk? And how does that fit into our housing and transportation? Office and labs located near schools will train Boston students for quality careers. So it's about how do we create the workforce of tomorrow by letting them have the opportunities today with workforce training and making sure we tie them up with jobs. Investment in culture that will make our communities grow stronger. It's so important as we look at the future of Boston, as we look at all these different components, we can look at them through silos. And I think in some cases we're looking in different areas. How do we improve transportation? How do we improve education? How do we make sure our housing plan of 53,000 units of new housing grows? How do we make sure we properly address the climate and climate control and make sure that the future generations? We're working in those different areas. But what Imagine Boston 2030 does is pulls it all together, because every single one of the parts work off each other. Imagine Boston 2030 will not only grow Boston, but it will preserve and enhance what we love about our city. By proactively and addressing challenges, we will make our city stronger and make our city more inclusive. I encourage all of you to participate in this conversation. This conversation isn't for the few. This conversation is for the many. So when you leave here tonight, I ask you to go out and talk to other people to make sure they get engaged in this process. The last thing I'll say about engagement. When we did Go Boston 2030, we launched that transportation program. Many people, I don't know if Rick Domino said, but Rick Domino mentioned to us, he said to me, he's been involved in transportation for over 40 years. And he never saw a process where so many people got involved in the conversation of our transportation system. We had 8,000 people participate, whether it was in person, online, through social media. And that's what we want to see. We need to get more than 8,000 for this exercise that we're talking about now. But it is important to get everyone involved. I'd like to thank you for being here. And now I'd like to introduce to you the new Director of Planning for the Boston Redevelopment Authority, Sara Myerson.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us this evening. It's great to have you here to join in the conversation about the future of our city in 2030 and beyond. I'd like to join the mayor in thanking Boston College, the Corcoran Center, and Rappaport Center for hosting us tonight. And thank you to John Fitzgerald and the entire Imagine Boston 2030 team for all their tireless efforts leading conversations across the city about our future. Tonight, we're here to talk about the opportunity of Imagine Boston, which will help us determine where and how Boston can grow inclusively. As you've heard, Imagine Boston is the first citywide plan in 50 years. With this initiative, the mayor looks to engage all Bostonians in creating a shared vision for the future of our city and to create an implementable framework to guide the preservation, enhancement, and growth of our city. The city has completed an initial phase of strategic planning and engagement to develop a vision for the city's future and set proposed strategic goals. These goals will set the direction for the plan that we will look to have completed by spring 2017. Tonight, we're here to continue that conversation about where Boston can guide growth in order to become more inclusive. For the past month, since the release of Guiding Growth Towards an Inclusive City, we've been gathering feedback just about this. We just finished a series of 8 community workshops in neighborhoods across the city. We've engaged with over 6,000 people with our street teams, and nearly 450 Bostonians have contributed their ideas to Co-Urbanize, our online mapping tool. Since we've started with Imagine Boston, we engage with residents across the city through open houses, suggestion boxes in local libraries, text messages, email, social media, and dozens of visioning sessions convened by groups and residents across the city. When we talked with everyone this fall, Bostonians told us about the opportunities and challenges they face and identified priorities for the city's future, including housing I can afford, better transportation options, and quality education for all. While housing, transportation, and education were the top priorities from our engagement, we also heard from residents who envision a future in which Boston's neighborhoods are safe for all residents, Bostonians have access to quality jobs and training, and the city is prepared for growing climate risks, and individual Bostonians can take action to improve the environment around them, whether that be through composting or access to renewable energy. We'll talk more about all of these priorities tonight as we consider how Imagine Boston can make our city stronger and more inclusive. As we think about this vision for the future, we also need to understand the context in which we're planning. As the mayor mentioned, Boston's recent growth has been phenomenal. Our population grew 6% between 2010 and 2014, nearly twice the rate of the nation. And while we've seen that regional growth rate slowing down a bit over the past couple of years, we're still growing faster than many metro areas, such as New York City. Our jobs grew by 7% in the same time period, again exceeding national growth. We feel this growth every day when we ride the T, when we look at the city's skyline, and when we search for new jobs. While this growth can strain the city, it also creates enormous opportunities to set a vision for what type of city we can become. Imagine Boston's mission is to make the city more innovative, accommodating the needs of our anchor industries, including the eds and meds, providing new talent-seeking modern workplaces, and enhancing neighborhood quality of life, while also making our city more inclusive, providing pathways to quality careers for residents along the attainment ladder, improving transit access to jobs, strengthening neighborhood open space and culture. Boston shouldn't have to choose between innovative growth and inclusive growth. We can guide growth to make our city more inclusive by constructing new housing units and commercial spaces, which help to address rising demand and help keep real estate prices in check, so a wider range of residents and businesses can afford to stay in Boston. We can also do this by fostering growth in Boston's leading industries, such as healthcare, which provide jobs at many skill levels. Enabling these types of industries to grow will create more pathways to living wage jobs. And we can help to provide spaces where creative, innovative industries can grow, attracting other companies and creating more jobs, investment, and opportunity throughout our city. Additionally, it's important to remember that Boston relies on property taxes for 2/3 of our revenues that we need to fund schools, public safety, and services. A growing city means we have more revenue to support these critical functions and make investments that will make Boston stronger and ultimately more inclusive. As we plan for this inclusive and innovative future, we need to understand how we got where we are today and what makes the context in which we are planning particularly unique. The change in the city's fortunes have been stark. In the latter half of the 20th century, Boston was a struggling northeastern city in decline, losing 60% of our core manufacturing employment between 1969 and 2000, and over 30% of our population by 1980. That's going from a peak of 800,000 in 1950 to 240,000. Boston's decline was the result of a variety of factors, including some national trends, such as deindustrialization and suburbanization, that led to 3 consecutive decades of population growth in the Commonwealth, while the city of Boston lost residents. We also struggled with a local race relations crisis that precipitated additional population loss. However, that trend has reversed itself. Fueled by strong growth in the education and healthcare sectors, we began growing steadily with jobs and population beginning in the 1980s. Today, Boston's workers are more productive than the average American worker, and their greater productivity adds $24 billion in incremental productivity to Boston's economy each year. This is supported by a regional economy of knowledge industries, which have helped to make Boston emerge as an international leader. And it isn't just businesses and industry that have made Boston an attractive place to live. The neighborhood fabric of Boston, its sports, its cultural institutions, all differentiate it from other East Coast peers and have made it an attractive city for new companies and residents. We've also made big investments in infrastructure to improve quality of life in our city. There was a $3.8 billion investment that brought us Deer Island water treatment facilities, which have been critical to restoring the harbor to its current greatness. And the Big Dig transformed downtown, stitching back together neighborhoods that had long been divided and creating nearly 27 acres of open space where the elevated highway once stood. We've also started to think differently about development over the past 15 years. As we've added jobs and residents, we've invested in new areas to live, work, and play. Areas like Fenway and the South Boston waterfront have been transformed. In particular, the past 5 years have seen rapid growth. Between 2010 and 2015, 4.8 million square feet of new office space was added, and nearly 5% increase in the overall stock. And another 4.2 million square feet of office space are either under construction or approved. As we've grown, Boston is leaving behind the declining cities of the Northeast and is emerging with a new West Coast set of peers, such as Seattle, San Francisco, and other East Coast leaders like New York and Washington. These cities have highly productive knowledge economies, and like Boston, are concentrated in several growing industries. Our diversified knowledge economy is how we have become the city of choice for GE and for an increasing number of startups and for the expanding biotech economy. However, with all of this growth have come new challenges. Recent growth in housing prices, spurred by insufficient housing supply, has made it harder for Bostonians to remain in their neighborhoods and for our neighborhoods to fully reflect Boston's diversity. While our median household income is in line with the nation, we have a much higher cost of living. When looking at housing prices as a proxy for this, we see that Boston has housing prices that are 2.5 times higher than the national average. 46% of Bostonians are housing cost burdened, paying more than 30% of their income to housing costs. And rents are rising rapidly at nearly 5 times the rate of incomes. Many of the neighborhoods that have seen the most significant price increases over the last decade also have large renter populations, meaning that many local residents are not benefiting directly from these property price increases. While growth brings new challenges, old challenges also endure. Systematic poverty persists, racial divisions continue, and Boston's children grow up with uneven access to opportunities. While industries like healthcare have career ladders to higher wage jobs for employees without a bachelor's degree, Bostonians remain underrepresented in the high wage sectors like professional services. Boston, like many urban areas, has seen a shift in its income mix since our low point in population in the 1980s. Between 1980 and 2013, the proportion of Boston households earning high incomes, those over $150,000 per year, grew substantially from 3.1% in 1980 to 13% in 2013. At the same time, however, those in middle-income households earning between $25,000 and $100,000 declined significantly, from 58% in 1980 to only 44% in 2013. We see the impact of this growing wealth and enduring poverty spatially. Many of Boston's neighborhoods are divided by income, with intense and persistent areas of poverty enduring in many areas. Climate change impacts, including coastal flooding exacerbated by sea level rise and storm surge, more frequent and heavy precipitation, and more frequent and intense heat waves, have put Boston neighborhoods, residents, and overall economy at risk. Our vulnerabilities as a dense urban center with aging infrastructure and housing significant infill make us particularly vulnerable to these hazards. While many coastal cities are also experiencing these risks, Boston is unique in the concentration of its economic assets that are within our floodplain. 10% of the city's land area, including core job centers, is in the 100-year floodplain, representing $13.4 billion in assessed value and 45.6 million square feet of space. Our residents are also at risk. 3.2% of Boston's population lives within the 100-year floodplain, which is less than some other urban areas. However, over 50% of the population that is living in these areas has a household income below $50,000. Finally, as we plan for the future of the city, we also need to assess our infrastructure and public realm. Boston has a strong foundation of open space assets. 95% of Bostonians are within a 5-minute walk of a park or open space, but the quality of these spaces varies tremendously. And many of our storied cultural institutions are concentrated in just a few neighborhoods, resulting in barriers to access and institutions that don't yet fully reflect the emerging diversity of our city that looks very differently today than it did in the 20th century. While Boston led the nation in developing reliable mass transit, today access to dependable, efficient transportation options varies significantly across neighborhoods. Many low-income and minority communities are chronically underserved by transit. And as we move forward, we need to address current demand and connect areas that have insufficient transit access today, which is something that the city's Go Boston initiative is also working to do in tandem with Imagine Boston 2030. And as we fill these gaps and address existing needs, we also need to identify the key transportation investments that will allow us to support future growth and additional jobs and population centers. These challenges, along with the accelerated rate of recent growth and anticipated future growth, bring us to a critical fork in the road. Make proactive decisions to invest and plan for future growth that is inclusive and addresses our challenges, or accept unnecessary and ill-advised limits on development that constrain supply and exacerbate the challenges of being a small city with a vibrant, fast-growing knowledge economy and finite land resources. In light of these opportunities and challenges, and informed by all of the input gathered over the course of the fall, Imagine Boston has developed a series of proposed goals and strategies to guide growth moving forward. We are proposing 4 goals to guide our growth: provide quality of life in accessible neighborhoods, drive inclusive economic growth, promote a healthy environment and adapt to climate change, invest in infrastructure, open space, and culture. Each of these goals will be supported by key physical investments, which we will develop through continued engagement with Bostonians. These initiatives could range from new dense mixed income and mixed-use housing districts to distributed employment centers and to a mixed-use waterfront. Taken together, these goals will help make for a more productive use of land we have and provide access to new centers of growth with a multimodal transit system. We'll also look to protect the city from the inevitable consequences of rising sea levels, and at the same time preserve the character and vibrancy of Boston's historic neighborhoods. As we have been working with all Bostonians to develop a vision for our future, we can look to other cities as examples of what might be possible. For example, in San Diego, the East Village, an area that was once the home to warehouses and abandoned lots, has recently become a vibrant urban mixed-use district with significant market and affordable housing developments. These affordable housing developments occurred alongside investments in public amenities, such as the Central Library and Petco Park. We're working towards these types of neighborhoods in Boston already, with transit-oriented development in places like Maverick Square in East Boston. As we plan for the future, we've identified strategies that will guide the type of investments we propose through this plan. To encourage accessible neighborhoods, we look to build and preserve housing that is affordable to Bostonians at a variety of income levels, and to create complete neighborhoods where all Bostonians are safe and have access to quality transit, healthy food, vibrant main streets, and community spaces. As we consider how we can drive inclusive economic growth, we can look to examples like Industry City in New York, a 6 million square foot former industrial campus on the Brooklyn waterfront, which has been redeveloped as a dynamic innovation and manufacturing community. Industry City's Innovation Center provides training and job placement to equip local residents with the skills needed to access innovation economy jobs, both at Industry City and elsewhere. As we consider all of the strategies to drive inclusive economic growth, we can look to examples that we already have in the city, such as Dudley Square, where the city, the private sector, and nonprofits have come together to create a vibrant neighborhood center and an emerging employment hub. Additional strategies to help guide this growth include expanded access to quality jobs through training, education, and technology access, expand competitive knowledge economy sectors by providing space, talent, and networking opportunities, encourage the growth of mixed-use neighborhoods offering quality jobs closer to residents, connect low-income communities to the job-rich districts, and reinforce the education, culture, open space, and vitality needed to attract and retain talented residents and companies. As we consider the future for our harbor, we can look to examples from other coastal cities. Hafen City in Hamburg, Germany, is a former port area that has been redeveloped as a 388-acre mixed-use neighborhood with 14,000 residents and 45,000 jobs. Waterfront promenades and parks step down from the elevated buildings to the waterfront, retaining connectivity to the river and protecting the area from flooding. This is an example of how the built environment and public realm can come together to help protect a city. Strategies to promote a healthy environment and help us adapt to climate change include create a waterfront where vibrant public open spaces coexist with revitalized neighborhoods, commercial centers, and important industrial uses. Protect the critical infrastructure and economic assets from impacts and disruption resulting from climate-related events. Continue to be a global leader in reducing GHG emissions in the built environment and energy, transit, and waste sectors. And improve neighborhood quality of life and climate resilience through improved air quality and water quality, brownfield remediation, and green infrastructure. Lastly, as we consider the future of our transportation network, we can look to cities like Portland, Oregon, where our multimodal and multinodal transit are helping residents move across the city more quickly and reliably. Portland's coordinated land use and transportation policies have encouraged transit-oriented development and resulted in mixed-use, high-density neighborhoods and investment in businesses near transit centers. When we think about how Boston's open space network could be transformed, there are opportunities to use great design to spur activity in existing parks and connect neighborhoods. In Chicago, Maggie Daley Park is a 20-acre public space in Chicago's Grant Park near the Lake Michigan shoreline. Opened in 2014, the park connects to adjacent Millennium Park, creating a continuous open space in downtown Chicago and offering views of one of the city's greatest environmental assets, its lake shore. When we think about how Boston's open space network could be transformed, there are opportunities to use great design to spur activity in our existing assets. We've already done this in downtown with the Rose Kennedy Greenway, and now is our chance to think about this citywide with a vision for the future. Strategies to invest in infrastructure, open space, and culture include provide affordable, reliable 21st century mobility infrastructure in all neighborhoods, including safe, multimodal streets, new travel options, and enhanced access to job centers and key services. Build and enhance open space that accommodates a range of activities and residents of all ages. Ensure a clean and vibrant public realm across all Boston's neighborhoods. And create and strengthen cultural offerings to reflect our diverse population and attract talent in tourism. The work we've done this fall and so far this spring is just the beginning of the conversation, and we'll be working over the next year to engage Bostonians in further shaping the future of the city. We're looking to continue that conversation tonight about our vision for the future with a panel of experts from across the nation. I'm excited to hear about their ideas about how Boston can grow as an inclusive and innovative city and moving forward, and look forward to getting input from all attendees at the reception later this evening. Now I'd like to welcome our moderator for the evening, Meghna Chakrabarti, who will lead our panel in a discussion about making choices for a growing city. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so very much for coming. And as our panelists make their way onto the stage, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank the Rappaport Center and the Corcoran Center for inviting me to moderate this evening's panel. It's a more than delightful opportunity because what we're talking about, I can't actually think of a more important set of ideas or issues to grapple with when it comes to moving forward together regarding the kind of city that we want to see for the next generation. So thank you very much for the invitation. Now, I also wanted to say that if I just may echo something that Mayor Walsh said, this is a conversation that whose one of its main goals is inclusivity. So we want to include as many voices and questions and ideas as possible. So what that means for tonight is that you have 3 means by which to participate in the conversation, to ask questions. They range from the traditional to the new tech version. So I believe that there's the possibility of writing on comment cards, and if you have a question and you want to do it that way, you can write on a comment card and we'll have someone come by and pick it up. We've also got roving microphones, so if at some point in time you have a question that you want to ask yourself, raise your hand and I'll try to get someone over to you. And then, of course, there's Twitter. Twitter works great, actually. So if you want to send in a question as a tweet, I am going to be following your questions. Just put the hashtag #ImagineBoston on the tweet, and we might throw a Twitter question or 2, or 10, or 15. We'll see what we get into the mix here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just first start by just briefly introducing everyone, just give you their names and their titles so you know who you're looking to and who you're speaking with. Hold your applause, though, because we want to cover as much ground as possible. And then what I'm going to do is, instead of letting everyone just have opening remarks, we're going to open by asking some questions of each of you just to get the conversation started. Okay, so first of all, John Barros, Chief of Economic Development for the City of Boston. He's down there. Thank you. Hold your applause, please. Everyone is well deserving of the applause, trust me, but just hold the applause, please. Harriet Tregoning is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Community Planning and Development at HUD. That's Harriet there in the middle. John Kriesberg is President of the Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations. That's John there in the nice blue tie. Walter Hood is a professor of landscape architecture and environmental planning and urban design at the University of California, Berkeley. He's sitting right here. And Shirley Leung, columnist for the Boston Globe. Her focus is on the business community, the city of Boston, and economic development, and of course, technology. And that's Shirley there with, I don't mean to reduce people to what they're wearing, but the great red shoes, just so you know. All right, so John Barros, let's start with you. This evening, if we can. I'd love to actually start with the idea. We heard of what the goals are. Those are the goals. But what does success look like? What does victory look like in 2030 for this initiative?
All right, yeah. It's good to be here. Thank you for the question, Megan. Victory is a city where a Roxbury resident worries about what's happening in the waterfront, right? And in fact, was part of the visioning for accessibility and the kinds of places you can go to take advantage of Charles River. That we wonder about when we live in West Roxbury, we wonder about South Boston and what might be happening in the Fort Point Channel, or that someone in Beacon Hill is worried about Lower Mills. Victory is that we are talking about a city and not about what's happening down the street from me, but have already predicted, because we have done such a good job in engagement, that we're a predictable city, that developers aren't going to go to the community meeting for the first time and wonder if their project is going to get supported. But they've already heard from the residents what the residents want, and they're going to go with the development that's already been shaped by a planning process, and that support is more predictable. Victory is us being able to grow a city while we preserve a city and enhance a city. That Boston can continue to grow in a responsible way and be a city that's far more inclusive, where we are leaving the disparities behind and creating some mixed income communities, and we are leaving behind the stigma of a city where we are not open to and tolerant of or providing opportunity for different races. Boston needs to become an open city. Victory is, in fact, where I think we're headed. I'm really, really excited about it, and for me, that's what victory looks like.
Great. Excellent vision. Now, of course, as we heard in the presentation just a minute or two ago, and kind of embedded in what Mr. Barros was talking about, housing is a big part of that picture. So, Harriet Tregoning, if I can just turn to you and speak a little bit more broadly, actually. Give us a sense of the national context of initiatives like this. Have other cities implemented Imagine Boston type initiatives?
No, just Boston.
or imagine fill in the blank type initiatives?
I mean, even in DC, where I was the planning director, our planning initiative, our big comprehensive plan, the first time in many, many years we had done was called Growing an Inclusive City. So I think these issues are actually common across a lot of cities. DC and Boston are interesting because they're almost exactly the same size. Mm-hmm. Their patterns haven't been the same, and their history hasn't been the same. But in both cities, for example, probably half the land is off the tax rolls, because of government and institutions, and so that presents some fiscal challenges. But what's going on all across the country is that there is a set of challenges that cities are looking at and a set of opportunities. The challenges are things like zoning that's kind of creaky, 50, 60, 70 years old, not really suited to what a modern city might need. A persistent lack of economic mobility. You saw the maps that Sara had up talking about generational persistent poverty in neighborhoods, real disparities in access to opportunity, disparities in travel time, disparities in all kinds of things, health outcomes, access to housing, access to quality schools. Also a restructuring global economy. Yeah. So since the recession, things have been really accelerated. A great example is that we lost about 8 million jobs initially in the recession. Average wage of those jobs was about $25 an hour across the country. By the end of 2013, all 8 million of those jobs were back in the economy. Average wage, $11 an hour. right? So that gives you an idea of kind of what we're facing. And so the thought in cities is that we're not going to get to a different outcome unless we be very deliberate about the type of growth we get and the type of jobs we want to have and how we're going to prepare for that. Other challenges are a changing climate, both more severe weather, but also in a city like Boston, rising sea levels, changing demographics. An aging population, much smaller households, fewer children in households, and sometimes a mismatch between housing stock and facilities and what people currently need. Some of the opportunities, like in Boston, are you've got really robust growth right now, and as do a lot of other cities. Some of them didn't start back in 1980. Your trend was ahead of a lot of other places, but sometimes it was 2000 or even as late as 2010, where growth really began to happen, and you can do a lot more when you're a growing city than when you're a declining city. So that opportunity has been very attractive to people. And the recognition that the amazing built environment that a lot of cities have, like Boston, fantastic neighborhoods, really high quality housing stock, a network of parks and open spaces, really wonderful amenities like a harbor or a river, that those things are really wonderful, unique assets that can really be built upon and are really hard to replicate in some other place.
Well, Shirley, John, and Walter, I'm going to give you your launch questions here in just a second. But as I told you, Twitter's a great tool. We've already got some questions here, so I'm just going to throw some audience questions at you. And any one of you, feel free to jump in. We'll mix it up a bit because we've got some good ones already. How about this one, for example, from Rachel Glogowski. And Rachel, if I've said your last name improperly, forgive me. But she's taking me to task. She says, one thing that's missing in this equation is health. What about discussing the opportunities for reducing health disparities in Boston? Who wants to jump in on that? Because I feel like every single one of these issues that we were talking about, equity, housing, the built environment, the natural environment, income, all of these things do flow through the health of individual citizens as well.
Well,
Yeah.
happy to jump in, and it's Joe, not John.
Oh,
You were
Joe,
so
I'm
worried
so
about
sorry.
my last name.
I was
We
worried
didn't
about
talk
your
my
last
first
name.
Joe, that's
Joe,
not a
I'm
bad
sorry.
name. It's not a bad name, but
Thanks for the correction.
that's all right. One of the exciting things happening in the area of health is a growing recognition of the social determinants of health and all the things that go into health that you just listed. And it's not just about health care. And the Affordable Care Act, it's not well known, but it really pushes the system to focus much more on social determinants of health, prevention, creating healthy living environments. And you see a tremendous amount of conversation about how can we connect housing to health. Obviously, if you live in a safe, decent house, you're going to have a healthier life. And in terms of the whole community. The challenge is doing that in practice and really shifting the way money gets allocated. But the exciting thing is there is now a regulatory framework that's pushing that on hospitals and insurance companies. We have a great opportunity with the changes coming to mass health in the next couple of years. So I think over the course of the 15 years of this planning process, we're going to see a dramatic shift in the way we think about health.
Right. Walter, I'd actually love your perspective on this as a professor of landscape architecture and environmental planning. I mean, in terms of how we design green spaces or think about green spaces, I mean, health is actually kind of an interesting consideration there. And, when Sara was talking about the fact that 95% of Bostonians do live within a 5-minute walk of a green space, but the problem is that the quality of those spaces is so disparate. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are there.
Well, I think, 20 years ago, I think there were great studies that came out about, communities where people walked, people were more healthier. And they were particularly looking at suburban communities versus urban communities. So I don't think Americans and even designers are arguing about that metric, but how do you get people out of cars? I mean, that's the big thing. And so if you think about planning like a city like Boston, transportation is really, really important, and how you connect people and get people to understand that I can go from A to B on a bike. I can go, through the metro, underground, or I can do it by surface, but I don't have to get on the highway. Mm-hmm. I don't have to sit all day. And I think planning, as part of this planning directive, all of the pieces really get at trying to get people to be in the space, the urban space. And I just wanted to go back to the three things that the mayor picked up on, though: housing, education, and work. And this idea of being inclusive. These are always been the three things that we've struggled with as Americans in our daily life, of being inclusive. But I also think on the other end, in my lifetime, all three of these elements is where I've had the most diversity and felt the most diversity. In housing, being in a city and living around different people, you can think about density that way. Education, if we think about New York, the PS schools, the public education, that's a place where people are going to be different versus the more private. And then at work, how do we get that mixture of work, which means we have to think about jobs in a very diverse way and not a homogeneous way. So all of those pieces together begin to suggest that the city can be dynamic, and getting back to your question about health, that then allows for this dynamic to kind of play out in the urban space.
Yeah, so the Boston Public Health Commission ran a campaign not too long ago that looked at health and health predictors as it related to place and zip codes. You tell me your zip code, I'll tell you what kind of risks you were facing. I'd love to have a Boston where we couldn't do that anymore, right? I'd love to have a Boston where, so right now the unemployment rate in my neighborhood is 17%. Unemployment rate in Boston is hovering above 4%, right? Those kind of disparities end up showing up in health, right, in health outcomes. For African American, Latino males in Boston, under 35 years old, you're looking at unemployment rate in the 30s, right? So, health is telling us how well we are doing in other areas of our city's life, right? Economics, housing, transportation, et cetera. And it would be exciting, and I think the third goal in the plan is around a healthy city, right? It'd be exciting to be able to figure out the predictors for all of our neighborhoods that we want to get to and make sure that all of Boston, regardless of who you are, your color, your address, that you're all healthy.
Yeah. Shirley, let me turn to you because, obviously a major part of the growth that we've seen in Boston over the past couple of decades is driven by the business community that you know well. And so I'm just wondering what you think the business community itself would like to see as a result of this initiative of Imagine Boston.
Honestly, I think the number one concern is that businesses don't want to be stuck with the entire bill of more housing, better transportation, and better schools. They want to be part of the solution. And I think what we haven't really talked about, what we need to talk about more, is businesses want clear and consistent policies and mechanisms to pay for transportation, to pay for better affordable housing, and also better schools. And I feel like there's a big disconnect. We really haven't kind of perfected public-private partnerships to get that done. And I think I think businesses want all of what we've talked about here today so far, because at the end of the day, it makes Boston a better place to do business. It's easier to retain and attract talent, and it's good for business. But I think the big question in an era of shrinking government resources is how do we pay for it? And I think that will be one of the big battles.
Does anyone else want to give their thoughts about that? Because that's a huge question, right?
Well, I think it is a big question, and people are talking about it all across the country. We have a big infrastructure deficit. Across the country, I think the American Society of Civil Engineers gives the United States like a D+. And in some ways, and maybe Boston is confronting this a little bit itself, it's not just that we haven't been investing. In many ways, if we had been investing, we'd be investing in the wrong stuff, right? Because the kind of multi-benefit infrastructure that you're talking about here, the making sure that it's inclusive, that it actually does things to reduce disparities, that is not just an automatic byproduct of an infrastructure project. You have to be very thoughtful and deliberate about that, and we haven't always been thoughtful and deliberate. So we might say to ourselves, in 2030, thank goodness we had a D+, because if we had an A, we would have invested and be living with all of the wrong decisions. So it's a chance to address climate change. It's a chance to to lower people's transportation costs by and increasing their access by where we put transit and making sure people benefit. And you need flood protection, but why should you build a levee or a dike if what you could do instead is have waterfront parks that provide that flood protection and also create amenities in communities? So I think that there's a national conversation happening about that, but cities are increasingly having to step up and turn to all the members of all the sectors of a city to look to pay for it, but also try to distinguish in the investor marketplace between really high quality multi-benefit infrastructure and that infrastructure that other cities are pulling out of a 40-year-old bag.
Yeah, so Joe and Walter, I know you both want to jump in here. Joe, go ahead.
Well, just in terms of the business community and the growth of our economy, there's a disconnect that I'm surprised doesn't come up more. The mayor talked about silos, and one of the big areas of growth, one of the reasons why our city is doing so well economically is because of the eds and the meds, educational institutions and healthcare institutions where there's been a lot of growth, a lot of investment. And a lot of cities are trying to leverage those institutions for their economic future. And at the same time, there's a whole nother conversation happening about how we have to stop the growth in healthcare spending and college education spending. I have 2 kids in college. I'm paying tuition now for 2 kids. At some point, the gig is up on the tuition increases, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. And on healthcare spending, at a certain point, we as a society can't keep spending so much. So I just wonder, in terms of the long-term future of our city, how those 2 sectors really are going to fare 10, 15 years out. Maybe they can continue to grow at the way they've been growing, but given the pressures on the other side, I think that's something we need to think about as a city, and I'm really raising the question because I don't know the answer, but I'm surprised that question doesn't get asked more.
Well, I just wanted to add that, I think really be thinking creatively about incentives for development and having businesses actually be part of building the public realm. I think in a lot of places, people reject this notion that if you can't ask this of a developer, they won't come. But I think as part of this conversation, I think the city has to welcome new developers, new businesses, but also point out that we're in this together. And this is things from being able to improve the street front out in front, or being able to provide housing in a very different way as part of the development. And I think the more creatively we can sort of think about that, the more people will want to be in Boston and want to come here because they actually see that they're part of a larger family.
Shirley, aren't we already seeing that with GE? But then there are also questions that come along with, are certain deals too sweet for businesses and companies?
Come on, Shirley. Help me out before I say it.
Well, you're going to talk about the free rent?
There is no free rent. Let's get that clear, right? GE is going to be, look, I'm hoping that, I'm going to put this down.
Now we're really getting to it.
Well, if we're, we have to be able to, in this process, remove the stigmas and not demonize growth, right? Because we all on one end say it's about growth. Without growth, we can't get to any of these goals that we're talking about. If we stay here or if we decrease, we're done, right? And then we gotta sort of reconcile ourselves that we should be, if we're gonna be about growth, we should also be about pro-business, right? And that there are good incentives that we can put in place for businesses to grow. And it's amazing because GE is going to rehab and put back on the market 2 empty warehouses and pay for it. And so the Globe is still pressing that we should be charging them rent for something that they pay for. I mean, so even in the best of deals, and I think we got a great deal with GE, we still get this negative spin because we're partnering with a business that's going to bring jobs and about $274 million of economic impact during the same time that we give them a $25 million economic tax incentive, right? They would have paid more in philanthropic donations than we would have given them in tax breaks. They would have paid more taxes, about 3 times more than that, than we have given them in tax breaks. But still, we continue to focus on sort of, not doing for business when we're asking for growth. So I just, maybe
John,
I'm a little too passionate about it.
Can I just jump in here, because this is just a question that I have for you as a follow-up on that. I mean, I get it when you lay out the numbers, it tells a certain story, but I think part of the reasons why some people feel like they want to push back against that is that, when you say GE's putting X number of $1 million back into the city due to philanthropy, I think, maybe there are people in a lot of the city neighborhoods who say, yeah, but that's not going to have a direct impact on my life. Whereas you could say that Boston is giving GE these direct incentives. So there's this disconnect between the numbers versus the actual impact that it may have on the lives of individual Bostonians in neighborhoods away from the seaport.
Okay, you do the math for me. We'll keep it very simple, right? So we're giving GE, we're not writing GE a $25 million check. GE is going to an area and a site that is not developed. On that site, specifically where they're going to build, we maybe collect $200,000 worth of tax every year. By the time GE is done, we would collect it 6 times that. GE would have paid probably $75 million in order to get the $25 million incentive, right? And so how is that not a good deal for Boston?
Well, again, so this is where, I'm only reflecting a lot of things that people who come on our show say, that it's a good deal for the city writ large. But part of this discussion is getting people on board because they feel individually invested, right? Or what's the individual impact? If there may not be one, I don't know, Shirley?
What I wanted to add was the tax incentives the city and state offered are no different that they would offer any other company. It was not a special deal for GE. So I think we should use the economic tools we have to attract companies in the hopes that it will create jobs. But where we can change the conversation or change what happens next is to make sure some of those what GE does is more inclusive, not just attract students from MIT and Harvard, which is what they want to do, but what can they do for the neighborhoods of Roxbury and Mattapan? What kind of programs can they do to invest in the schools around them? That's the conversation we need to have, not blame the economic tools. And that's how you create in more inclusive neighborhoods, and that's how you get people moving up the economic ladders and social ladders in the city.
Yeah. Joe, go ahead.
I'm not going to weigh in on the GE thing, but I do want to bring it back to Imagine 2030, because I think the dynamic that we're discussing is one of the key challenges to achieving our goals for 2030, which is public confidence in the government and the lack of public confidence in the government. And never has that been more evident than today, although it's been growing for decades. We have to, when you talk about what would success look like in 2030, people believe in their government institutions. But the cynicism and the negativity, much of it justified, but I think often overblown, undermines our ability to do big and great things for our city. I'm facing that now as I'm working on the Community Preservation Act campaign. People immediately think there's a game or something. But we have to do big things together. As Barney Frank used to say, that's what government is, when we all get together to do something. And we've had great success. The harbor, the Big Dig, we talked about those things. And we're going to need to do big things in the future. And I think the openness of this process, the inclusivity of this process, the transparency of this, the work you're doing at the BRA is all in the right direction, but obviously we have a long way to go to get where we need to be.
Yeah. Harriet, I saw that. Did you want to mention something quick?
I was just going to say, in the context of Vision Boston 2030, that the future state is that these investments that we're talking about will create such a quality of life, such a quality of place, that I think that will pale in comparison, that will make any economic incentive pale in comparison, because in terms of what Shirley's already mentioned about what companies want, they want a well-trained and educated workforce. They want to be able to attract and retain the best and the brightest, and that is increasingly a place attribute, right? It used to be that the people followed the jobs. Well, companies are now following the talent, right? And that's really a strength for Boston. But I completely agree with Shirley that you might still be having a conversation in 2030 with companies, but it won't be around will you be here or not. It'll be around what can you do to to reduce the disparities? What can you do to make Boston a model for economic mobility, where this thing that we all believe about our communities, this American dream, that with education and hard work, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, no matter how humble your beginnings, and be anybody and do anything, right? That is the promise of our country that in too many cities we have failed to deliver on, and I think that is a conversation worth having with everybody.
Yeah, any one of these questions we could end up talking about answers and visions for an hour, but I do want to turn the corner a little bit here and talk about another sector, an aspect of life in Boston, which is incredibly important. That's education, because we're getting a lot of questions and thoughts about education. For example, on Twitter, we've got some folks saying, hashtag imagine Boston, where Boston school families' voices are respected. And then imagine Boston, where children could ride public transportation to their excellent public schools. That's just a couple of the many Twitter remarks we've had about education. And then we have this question here from Dominic Doyle, who's from West Roxbury, who wonders, if property prices are rising, why are school budgets falling, and what are the solutions? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, it's education is critical. I mean, it's the promise for our future. I mean, if companies are coming here because of talent and we don't have the right educational system, then we're going backwards, right? I mean, this is important. It's really critical. I think those who tweeted are absolutely right. I think, however, for those who are listening, the education budget is not falling. The expense is rising quicker than we can rise the budget. I mean, it's very different to say that we are putting less in education. In fact, on a per pupil basis, Boston is increasing how much we put in for education. So the cost structure for our education system is broken. And we need to figure out, as we get less money from the state and as we try to keep up with our cost structure here, how we rethink our school district in a way where we can make sure that every dollar that we put in the school district, in fact, goes to students and their education. It's critical, it's important, and they're right.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
I would just say one thing about it, that I live in a city where we probably have the highest per student spending in the country, and we've refurbished a lot of the physical plant of our schools, and a lot of them are very beautiful, but the part of the issue is our development patterns and the patterns of poverty and affluence, and that kids who are or who are concentrated, very poor kids concentrated in schools, don't do as well as kids that live in mixed income neighborhoods. So part of what's happening in Boston and a lot of other cities is that you're seeing an influx of different incomes, but the seeds of economic opportunity and mobility don't just come from having a statistically mixed income neighborhood. We have half the number of households with children today that we had in 1940. And so the constituency supporting schools is half what it was. And part of what is missing in a lot of our conversation about neighborhood change is not just the physical change, but how do we get people, very different people, longtime residents and newcomers, to talk together about their common future. I think this planning process is a great start, but we need to have these conversations every day so that people can be not just in the same physical space, but be in the same future for a neighborhood.
Walter, go ahead.
Well, just to add, our public school systems it's broken. I mean, even at the university level. I mean, I've been teaching for 20 years. We've been taking cuts for 20 years. Asked to do the same thing with less money. And that's what you're talking about. So we have to really rethink public education and make it exciting. I don't know about you guys in the audience, but basic public, it's not exciting. You go to those schools. In a lot of places, they're on lockdown most of the day, but there are some exciting models. Alice Waters' Edible Schoolyard. I had breakfast there over Christmas, and it was a wonderful thing. They weren't spending, millions of dollars on bad cafeteria food. They were actually growing their own food, and the kids were actually chefs. And so they actually rethought the model beside the public school system and forced them to change. And so, again, if I go back to the moniker Imagine, I just think we have to be imaginative. And as a designer, we can't keep looking at the same methods and asking for a different product at the end of the day. And so imagination means to close your eyes and go, well, what can GE do? Well, maybe GE can take the junior high, a junior, and they can spend half the day there. Emeryville, California has a program where you can actually, half the high school kids are actually seeded out in the community with Pixar and other places. And so that means that the facilities are smaller, much more agile, but the students actually live in a community. Right. And so, again, if we can use this to push back and actually get people to sort of see the world in a different way, I think that's what we're really trying to do.
So this is a great point because, to get us again back to the themes of imagination and inclusivity and closing disparities, the BRA recently put out a report that had some numbers in it that have still stuck in my head. That, for example, one of the numbers was right now, 40% of the jobs in Boston require a bachelor's degree or higher. But that, and we saw some of the figures here, but when you look at who holds the bachelor's degree in the city of Boston, 75% of them are held by white Bostonians. So when it comes to the economy that we have now and the economy that we want to grow, there's a gap there. And of course, Boston is a majority minority city. So working from both K through 12 and then beyond in terms of closing all those gaps together. I mean, they're very symbiotic, all these challenges. And I'm just wondering, you got to start thinking about roles that businesses can play. Any other ideas there in terms of closing those educational gaps at any or all levels?
I mean, one thing we talked about in the Mayor Walsh is about funding pre-K, and I often wonder, I don't know why the business community doesn't get behind that, doesn't just fund it. I mean, find a way to do it. There's a lot of research out there saying that, early education is key to future success, and, perhaps that's where we should put our money. I mean, it seems like the business community rallied around, the tax, right? Indexing the gas tax that didn't work. It seems like they need another big issue, and I think pre-K would be great, funding it.
Federal Reserve of Indiana, I believe, did a study that showed that for every dollar invested in pre-K, you save about $17 by the time the kid's a teenager in sort of mitigating all the damage that we did up to that point. And so it's a great investment. And in fact, if the business community was to step up and do that, it would be a really wise way to get a return on an investment. I want to go back to this notion, though, of design and how we build a city and the opportunity that we have here today, right, as we grow as a city. Look, we made decisions in the past that has created some real concentrations of poverty in Boston, right? And it costs us money to have that kind of a city. One budget item that I would look at would be school transportation. We're busing kids all over the city in the name of integration because we have real concentration of poverty, and we know what that could do to schools, right? It costs us about $100 million a year to bus $100 million a year to bus kids all over the city. So when you think about the opportunity that we have with Imagine Boston to plan a city that's equitable, that really addresses the question of inclusion, and to make sure that we have mixed income cities, it's a wise investment to invest in pre-K. It's a wise investment to invest in a city that is inclusive, or else we will pay down the line.
I will just say something quickly about that DC has universal pre-kindergarten for 3- and 4-year-olds, and one of the unexpected consequences was that it instantly economically integrated the public schools in places where there was a lot of neighborhood change. It might have been 10 years or 20 years or never before middle-income families would take their kids to a very poor-performing, high-poverty school, but it happened overnight because for your 3- and 4-year-old, you want clean, safe, and convenient, and now you have a bond with parents of all kinds, in your neighborhood. And it's such a strong economic incentive, because in DC it's not means tested. It's worth about $20,000 a year per child, per family. It juked the birth rate up in DC and the family formation rate. It was powerful.
And also I was going to say, think about the impact on the parents who had to stay home to watch those kids, who couldn't afford. I mean, now you unleash
absolutely,
right, more income into that household, because now they're free to go find work and then move up the ladder.
All right, let's talk transportation. A lot of people want to talk about it. So we've got, I'm not going to ask you to answer all these, but I just want to give you a sense as to what's on people's minds regarding transportation. Rachel Silbert sent a tweet saying, "When will transit really be public? I can drive downtown for less than the commuter rail." A couple people want to know about what future do driverless cars have in Boston. We've got a written-in question here about why does the MBTA not collect exit data to find out where people are really going and maybe structure pricing that way. Then we got a lot of questions about bike safety in Boston, which I know has been a big issue for a lot of people. So let me just boil all that down to one part of it, not representative, but one part of it, because Dave Newbold, also from West Roxbury, that was an accident, I don't mean to keep choosing West Roxbury, but wonders, how can we reduce and tame car traffic?
Reduce and tame? What, tame?
Tame.
Tame.
Yeah.
Like better drivers? Calmer drivers?
That's an impossibility, I'm sure, but...
You know, one thing that you know, a lot of people, I think this is done in London and other parts, but you could also do, what is that, tolling?
Port and charge.
What is
The congestion pricing you're talking about?
Yeah, like peak pricing for tolling, you know, when
To drive
rush
in and out
hour.
of the city.
Congestion fees.
Yeah, congestion fees, that's what it's called. You know, when you're driving town and you start tolling, you start charging higher prices during, you know, rush hour, and that can help reduce. I don't know if that will reduce overall car traffic, but that might reduce congestion.
Well, there's two ways to kind of go about it. You can create disincentives by creating some fees and using cars at certain times, right? Or you can create incentives for people to get out of their cars and take public transit, right? In creating incentives, you'd have to invest in public transit that is of quality and that can get me to where I need to go in an efficient way, right? We have clearly not invested in public transit in a way that is giving people better options than cars in most instances. And we have demand on certain lines, and people are really using it, and maybe more than we obviously anticipated. I think investing in other modes of transit will allow us to decrease congestion.
The other way to think about transit is not to build new systems, but to get people to see that there are other alternatives, which is the cheaper, right? I mean, it's what New York did by just like closing some roads, you know, painting some services and putting tables out there, and then people are like sitting in the middle of the road eating. And then they figure, wow, I can actually be downtown without my car. But first, people have to see it. And I do think as the low-hanging fruit for designers is we have to get people to just sort of see that there are these other ways of doing things. And I think a lot of cities have built new infrastructure, but as long as people don't see it, they'll still act the same way. And so how do you change the sociology? It's changing the sociology is to get people in the same space just to act a different way. And I do think Boston, you saw in a lot of these images, you guys have some great things. You have density. You do have some systems that connect. I think you need to be bold, and you need to sort of step out, again, creatively, step out of the way and go, let's close that street for a day and see what happens. And you'll be surprised what happens. People actually will start to say, wow, I've never seen that building before, or I've never seen this restaurant. And before you know it, you actually will have people advocating, right, for you to start changing things. So again, I think it's a give and take. I don't always think that you have to make it first, but you're getting people to sort of realize it.
I would just say that that's a great point about low-cost things that you could do. Only about 12% of all the trips that households take every day are commute-related. So the vast majority are for other things that are part of your daily needs. So, you know, while you're doing this planning exercise, what about making sure every single neighborhood in Boston is very convenient so that all of your daily needs practically could be met in that neighborhood? That might mean rezoning it so that you could have more employment in that neighborhood. It certainly means all kinds of shopping and services in those neighborhoods, because those trips are easily taken then by something other than a vehicle. Vehicles are used, automobiles in the US are parked 95% of the time and driven 5% of the time. And that's why you see so much happening with technology and shared use vehicles, because it's a market failure. You know, and millennials and anyone who's thinking about it really doesn't want to pay for something that they're not using. So so even if people are going to be ending up in cars more often, they're going to use many fewer cars per capita because those cars are going to be used a lot more. That's what's going to happen with autonomous vehicles. They're not going to be owned by individuals. They're just going to be sent away, because parking is the biggest pain about owning your own car. They're going to be sent away instead of parked, and there'll be many, many fewer cars on the road, and people will have other uses for that space.
Yeah. Well, let's push forward a little bit. Again, my apologies if people think that we could spend a lot of time on every single one of these issues because it's so true. I mean, just talking about transportation could fill up an entire evening. But there are a lot of questions about housing, again, of course, and the housing infrastructure in Boston. And I think Avery Newton here has sent in a good representative question on that front. Because Avery writes, 58% of Boston housing was constructed pre-1939, and Avery cites the source of the BRA. So how can we modernize at a large scale? And I would add, should that even be a goal, modernization at a large scale, or different kinds of thinking about upgrading and improving Boston housing, and including the 53,000 units that the city wants to build, but those would be new. So the modernization question first, it's a good one for an old city like Boston.
Well, I've been waiting for the housing question all night, so I'm going to grab this one. So we absolutely need to build new housing, and the mayor's goal of 53,000 housing units is, I think, the right goal. Maybe it needs to be higher. And we are on track. We had a running start, which is good. The question is, can we sustain that through what is likely to be at least some ups and downs of the real estate cycle over the next 15 years? But what's great about the mayor's plan is it's not just one number. It's a lot of numbers, and it's really focused in on some key issues, and that's where some of the challenges start to emerge. Home ownership, big challenge. Half the people in Boston are people of color. 10% of the people who bought a home last year are people of color. Huge problem. The plan calls for 6,500 new low-income housing units. That'll leave us 30,000 short. If we achieve our goal, we'll still be 30,000 people short. Now, I don't blame the mayor. He can't build it if the federal government doesn't provide the funding, if the state doesn't provide the funding, but we just need to realize that even if we attain these goals, we still have huge problems, and it's due to low-wage jobs, it's due to market failures in the housing market that are beyond the ability of one city government to fix. That said, we need to do everything we can, both in the new and in the existing. One tool for that, the Community Preservation Act. Hopefully I can talk about that a little more later, but we need new resources. We can't do it on the cheap. But I think it's important in terms of our existing housing stock, and this really, again, goes to Imagine 2030, that we need new housing, but we also want to preserve the distinct character of our neighborhoods. We don't want homogenized neighborhoods all across the city, all looking like the Seaport or Boylston Street, honestly. So we want to have different neighborhoods because people like different things, and a diverse city needs to have diverse places. And part of what makes Boston special is our physical is the built environment, is the housing. So maintaining and making sure people have high quality housing that's safe and decent. We need more home rehab. We need to have programs for seniors who want to stay in their home and fix it up. But I don't think we should think about replacing large amounts of existing housing.
I would also say that along the same lines that we were talking earlier, what can you do with what you have? You have a huge demographic change. It's not just Boston, it's every major city. My mother-in-law rattles around in a house that had, by herself, that used to have 5 people in it, right? It's not the greatest house for her. It's on 3 levels. She's in her 70s, right? So what a lot of cities are doing all across the country are something called accessory dwelling units. Without changing the character of the housing stock or the neighborhood, they're changing their zoning to allow an additional unit. In some cases, the owner of the house moves into that unit because it can be made ADA accessible, right? And then they have income that enables them to have a more secure retirement and to be able to age in place, and they're not alone on their property anymore. So that's a real tool. San Francisco's change to ADUs added an additional 100,000 potential housing units, and it didn't cost anything. It didn't change anything. Although you could use some city funds or even HUD funds to support a program that would assist homeowners in doing those conversions.
No, I think what you're building on are these models again to, think about housing and think about new models that will actually allow us to sort of, not scrape away what we have, but to build on what we have. And I think one of the models that we can look at, again, with the changing demographics, we've seen this in Oakland and in San Francisco. You guys only have like 400,000 medium income. We're at 1 million, right? And so even employees at my studio who work for me, they live 3 and 4 in a building or studio together. But what's happened, the market then said, wow, there's a need for this type of housing. And so the housing now is just really diverse because they're seeing that the populations are not up at the 500,000. The populations are still around the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. And so these new models are actually coming out. And the millennials, the younger people, actually, they live a lot freer than a lot of us on the stage here. And so I do think, again, using design as a way to really think about how to set new models out there that really helps to preserve, but actually extends the city, the demographics of the city.
I want to say, so in fact, the mayor mentioned the fact that the city's growing faster than we originally had projected, right? And although we're doing a great job in producing more housing, I think last I looked, we were at 122% of our goal for the 53,000 housing we wanted to build, with some areas lagging and some areas going really fast. Production's really important. I think what Sara said about making sure that our plan both grows where we need to grow in the city. So where are we going? Where are we going to add density? Preserves our neighborhood's characters, right? So not everywhere, we shouldn't grow everywhere, right? And where shouldn't we grow, right? And then enhance the housing stock or what we already have, and how do we do that and preserve affordability, et cetera. That's why I think it's a multi-pronged approach. Production is clearly a part of it, and if production is a part of it, it's got to happen near the transit nodes. It's got to happen where you have certain infrastructure. So it has to come in with an infrastructure plan and an investment in infrastructure to do. It's really, both strategies together.
So we got to wrap up here pretty soon, but I did wanted to sort of throw 2 more questions out there. The first little group takes us back to the business community, actually, because we have some tweets here. One is an idea really from Mary Tabor, who said that some employers, especially the Meds, offer transit subsidies, and she wants to suggest that we encourage other corporations to do the same. And then Stephen Godfrey from Roslindale sent us this tweet saying, if economic growth and impact is part of the solicitation for businesses, explain how low-income communities benefit. So if I understand this right, if economic growth and impact is part of how we're drawing businesses in, explain how can low-income communities benefit?
Well, they benefit, but what we've been talking about earlier was the idea is that and also Harriet mentions, you have to be deliberate in our planning and of whether when we give economic incentives or when we bring, or even when we don't give them economic incentives, when they come into the city, we talk about what can we do about creating jobs in the city in other neighborhoods, not just grabbing kids from, not to offend any college graduates or soon-to-be college graduates, but how do we create a pipeline from neighborhoods, from low-income neighborhoods? And I think that's a conversation that needs to happen more often if we want to build a more inclusive city. There will always be income inequality. There will always people who are rich, there are always people who are poor, but what we need to create is more opportunities for everybody, and so that there's a feeling that you can move up in this world, in this city, in Boston. You don't have to be born to the right parents, being born in the right neighborhood, that you can, through the right education and through perhaps opportunities, through certain policies and mechanisms that the city and the state, ink with companies, that you can move.
Yeah, I just want to say economic mobility is a really important rate to continue to monitor and make sure that we are a city of opportunity. We are a city. Business is important. Business attraction, growth, retention is important. We just released a study on small businesses. Small businesses are the lifeline of the economy, of Boston's economy, of America's economy. GE is important, there's no question about it. But I want to remind us about the importance of small businesses in our neighborhoods, small businesses throughout our city. 40,000 small businesses in Boston. The lion's share of jobs come from those small businesses in our city. So, supporting those small businesses, making sure that they're growing, not being displaced because real estate pricing is going high, et cetera, really critical. And then we've got to remember that we're a city that is highly dependent on property taxes, right? And commercial taxes is at a higher rate than residential taxes, right? And so every time, for instance, a GE comes to town and is going to pay taxes, it helps our schools, it helps our roads, it helps build out our neighborhoods. I mean, this is something that directly impacts the city's ability to deliver services.
Yeah. So my final question actually comes from Welcome to Dot. That's their Twitter handle. And it's actually, it's a great question because I think, the goal here is inclusivity, right? And Welcome to Dot has this very simple question because they've been watching over one of the feeds here. Is Imagine Boston at its root a political exercise or a planning exercise?
Well, I hope it's both, because politics is how we're going to get it done, because Imagine Boston 2030 needs to become reality Boston 2030. Otherwise, why bother? And the way it becomes a reality is we use the political process to get things done. And I'll take this moment to make a specific suggestion in that regard, which is we have an opportunity this November to adopt the Community Preservation Act, something the business community is already working with us to make happen, to provide new funding for homes, for parks, and for historic preservation. 3 things, all of which are critical to what Sara laid out earlier. If we're going to add 100,000 people, we better improve our parks. If we're going to deal with climate change, we better improve our open space. And if we want Boston to still be the special place that we all love, we better preserve our heritage and our history. So this is a specific opportunity to use politics to achieve our imagination.
And anyone else want to take that?
I would just add to the transparency piece. The more transparent you can be, the more risk you can take, because people will offer you that latitude. And the more we can see where our money goes. I mean, one of my things as a taxpayer, I never know where my money goes. And if we can make that transparent, that if I can see that 30% is going to education and what those benefits are, and I think the more we can be transparent, the more risk you can take for housing, for education, and for all.
I would say that it's also an exercise in setting expectations, citizen expectations of its government, government's expectation of its business community, right? We talked about what would the future be like in 2030. That's when everyone who does business with Boston says, here is how I'm helping you to meet these objectives. Here are the goals for the city. Here is how I am contributing to that collective future. So I think, we talked about norms when we kicked off talking about health, but I do think this is a norm resetting process for the whole city and for everybody in it, and I think it's an important thing to do.
Well, with that note, I just want to say thank you to all the panelists here. I see Neil, who's he's a cleanup crew here. But thank you all very much for this really interesting conversation.
So this is, obvious evidence that this could go on all night, and these guys could keep talking, and you'll have every opportunity to do that in the reception out back. My name is Neil McCullough. I'm the director of the Corcoran Center for Real Estate and Urban Action, one of the 2 centers, including the Rappaport Center, that have sponsored tonight's activities. Because we don't want to let anybody leave BC without being branded with maroon and gold, we've got some gifts for our panelists. I hope that you'll enjoy these gifts from Boston College, but I'd like everybody here again to thank our moderator, Meghna Chakrabarti, and all our panelists. I'd also like to, again, recognize the benefactors of the two centers, the Corcoran Center and the Rappaport Center, Joe Corcoran and Mr. and Mrs. Rappaport. Thank you so much for all that you've done for BC and everything that you could do to make tonight a wonderful night. So tonight couldn't have happened without the Carroll School of Management and the law school. It's been great. Our new centers have been introduced to the school, and we've been welcomed by these different parts of the university, and that's been fantastic. But tonight, we should especially say thanks to a few people. Abigail Sherburne, Hillary Bailicki, and Julie Kelly. They did an outstanding job making sure tonight happened. And we also have the Corcoran Center interns and volunteers that are all around here. Thank you. So the Rappaport Center focuses on law and public policy, and the Corcoran Center focuses on real estate and urban transformation. When we talked about this event last summer, it was easy to understand where the interests of the centers, Boston College, and Imagine Boston were. They were all aligned around the shared values of advancing public deliberation. So encouraging civic engagement is a touchstone of higher education. And today we considered some of the most pressing issues of our day, especially related to urbanization. And we did it with respect and openness. The discussion here demonstrates what makes our society great. This afternoon, we all made a small contribution to a public process for the city, a public process for the residents, and a contribution that will serve well into the future. So thank you all for participating and thinking about cities, thinking about our collective future. But we're not done. So behind Robsham Theater tonight, we have a big tent, both metaphorically and realistically. There's a big tent back there. And there's food inside the tent, so we hope that you'll all join us there. But join us for food and conversation. The Imagine Boston team has brought research, some posters, different ways of engaging you on what Boston's future should be like. So please join us out in the tent. And to get there, please exit the theater to the left side, and there's the different volunteers that are here to guide you on the way. And again, thank you for coming.